Welcome to the Scale with Stride podcast, the place where you come to listen to some of the world's most influential leaders of the SaaS industry. I'm your host, Adam Richardson, and today I'm pleased to introduce you to John Weisensee. John shares his 20 plus years of experience in building out pre and post sales teams, a really humble guy who's had a hugely successful career working for the likes of IBM and Collibra. In today's conversation, I wanted to focus in on his journey at Collibra, where he joined them at Series B and he went on a massive journey of growth over the last few years. In today's conversation, we focus in on things like how he scaled the pre and post sales functions at Collibra, where he feels pre-sales should join the sales process, and how to set targets effectively for your pre-sales team. It was a really insightful conversation. Let's dive in.
It gives me great pleasure to introduce John. John, firstly, thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of the podcast. I've been really looking forward to recording today's session. Obviously, spent a lot of time, studying your background and previous conversations that we've had. So I'm sure you're going to have a lot to offer. So I suppose for the benefit of our listeners, if you wouldn't mind, just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background and what it is that you're up to today.
Yeah, hi, Adam. Thank you. Back at you. Thank you so much for, having the faith to put me on your podcast. It's an honor to be here. And so, hi, everyone out there. My name's John Weisensee. For probably the last, 20 plus years, I've been working in various roles throughout sort of the customer journey, both on what is called the post-sale side of the house and implementation and or probably professional services leadership and or pre-sales, in both as an individual contributor in my early days as a pre-sales engineer and most recently as a pre-sales leader. And so that's me. That's what I've been up to, I guess, over the last 2+ decades. Wow, man, time flies. It's hard to kind of say that out loud, but I guess the gray and the beard kind of proves I've been around a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, you've worked for some household names like IBM, and also you were a big part of, I suppose, the success at Collibra, joining at Series B, and taking them right through their sort of scale ups. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing at the moment in terms of DCX and Cradle.
Yeah, long story short, I was fortunate enough to hook up with some old friends that are in the process of launching 2, probably 3 different businesses. I'm helping them out right now with 2 of them. As you mentioned, Cradle, which we are basically a vessel platform for researchers or those in the research field, targeting R1 universities to help accelerate their discovery and their learning through high performance computing. So providing them the tools necessary in order to do their research versus like traditional organizations like big AWS, GCP, Azure, where a lot of those organizations have individuals have to start from scratch and build their environments. We're basically offering up research as a pre-configured environment, almost like a one-click, get your access to high-performance computing, and then go run just go off and do your research. And then on the flip side of that, DCX is basically a co-location facility or a data center that our founders, again, old friends of mine, have been very successful in building and exiting data center companies. And DCX is their third endeavor to jump back into that world.
Cool. Well, thanks, John. I think I want to start at the beginning, really. You're looking at your profile. You come from a very much a technical background. I think, you're an engineer earlier on in your career, and then you made that transition into sales. So, it'd be really good to understand, I suppose how you first got that introduction to, more customer facing roles, coming from a purely technical and moving into that like technical sales role. So how did you make the step into the sales roles?
Yeah, it's an interesting and great question because throughout the course of my career, when I've spoke to various folks that are on the pre-sale side, there's no to date, I've not found one person that raises their hand and says, as a young lad or a young gal, I wanted to jump into the world of pre-sales engineering. It kind of seems like we all
Quite
stumble into
recruitment.
this, yeah, by accident. And it's a happy accident, I guess. And my world came through post sales as an implementation specialist for a very young start, well, an early stage startup. I was an implementation engineer responsible for just installing the platform, working with our customers in order to make sure the platform was leveraged and they were getting the most out of it, right? Because we were young, we did not really have the quote unquote pre-sales role, and we had a sales individual looking to land a prospect, and they were asking deep technical questions about what did we do, how does at the time we were in the early stages of master data management before the market was even defined, or just as the market was being defined. How do your algorithms work? How does this work? How does that work? And they're like, who can do this? And so I think they looked around, and I drew the short straw, maybe, Adam. I don't know. They're like, put John in front of the customer or the prospect, and that's what happened. I just got into a meeting. I ended up giving a demo of the platform, talked about our capabilities, was able to go pretty deep to talk about the technology, and satisfied all the requirements or questions that were coming my way. And naturally, what happens is if I think we went on to win that deal. And what happens is I love my sellers out there. I love working with them. But if they latch on to something that works, I guess a star is born, right? So it's like, I need this guy on all my deals moving forward. And that was my endeavor into sort of the pre-sales world. And in full disclosure, Adam, at first I fought it, right? Because I was like, I didn't really feel back then, I was young and dumb, so I didn't really feel like I was going to be able to stay up on technology. And so I was fighting it a little bit. I thought implementations, making customers successful with our technology was the place to be. It sounds cliche, Adam, but I really do enjoy working with prospects and customers and helping them solve their problems. Well, little did I know then, when I was much younger, yeah, sales is where you're really trying to uncover your customers' challenges, problems, and then hopefully through positioning the technology, or just helping them understand how the technology you're selling can help them be successful, they eventually lean your way and go with you and buy your platform. So lo and behold, I realized that side of the house was awesome, because not only are you solving the problems, but you're helping to uncover them. You're helping organizations potentially uncover issues that they didn't even know, and then just working with them to make them successful. So I ended up in really, really, really enjoying and staying probably most of my career on the pre-sale side.
And you've said that to me before about something that you really enjoy is helping customers, be successful, helping them solve the problem. And in the case of pre-sales, is helping them identify problems they maybe didn't know they already had. Whether that's been as an implementation engineer, whether that's been in pre-sales, whether that's been in a leadership role, it seems like throughout your career, there's always been consistent progression, consistent promotions. But another thing that's always been sort of synonymous with yourself is that wherever people go, they try and take you with them. So one of the things I'd be keen to hear is, like, from your perspective, what is it that you've done throughout your career that's enabled you to be so successful and enable so many people to see your ability and the potential in you, to want to sort of when they move to other organizations, want to bring you along for the ride? Because from conversations we've had, IBM to Collibra, that happened And then again, from Collibra into the ventures that you're in now, these are previous people that you've known and worked with before that have wanted you on board to help drive, and achieve their company mission. So what is it that's so, I suppose, unique about yourself, or what do you put it down to that's made you so successful?
I don't know, man. Maybe somewhere along the way I messed up, but in a good way. Ironically, Adam, it's funny because you and I have been brought together through a mutual
Yeah,
acquaintance, right? So even
exactly.
we were referred to each other. So I kind of felt honored to have that happen. But I think in the early stages of my career, back to that company that I discussed, where I launched into my pre-sales world. I don't know, man. I just worked hard. Um, I try to stay out of the politics. I just try to do what's right for both the organization and our prospects. I might work a little bit too much, which tends to sometimes, everyone's looking for work-life balance. I try to achieve that, but a lot of times, I work in a world where sometimes, there's weekend work, sometimes there's nighttime work and things like that. And I think I've just constantly delivered and helped people, both again internal colleagues along with my prospects and or customers be successful. So I established a really good network in my early days, and to your point, that network has kind of come through for me throughout the course of my career and has introduced me to different companies, different people, aka you and I. And so I feel very, very, very fortunate to have somewhere along the way made a good impression on folks, and that has luckily served me well so far.
So, I mean, what I take from that is, highly conscientious, you care about the customer being successful, and you sound like a live to work kind of guy. So you work pretty hard. So when you put all those three things together, I'm not surprised you've done so well.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I have you ever taken those personality tests?
Yeah,
Or
I have.
there's a
You'd be
million of
horrified by my results.
yeah, there's a million of them out there, right? And one of the ones that I did at Collibra was the identity insights, and it's just a color pattern, right? They're all very similar. They give you different results. This is just the one, and my dominant color or my dominant tendency is compassion. I guess I lead with green, which has always been funny to be successful in a world of what they call pure red, right? In the world of sales, where everyone's you know, short
Yeah.
answers, driven, move forward.
Yeah.
I guess that whole the understanding side of my personality, which I've now learned through taking these personality tests, again has served me well. So it kind of, I think, goes back to what you talked about. Somewhere along the way, I guess I give a hoot. So
Yeah, well, that's I can't remember who said it, but I think it's like the beginning of wisdom is to know thyself. So it sounds like after a few tests or two, you started to get to know what you're all about. But
One of the things I'd like to zoom in on is your time at Collibra. You did a whole host of different roles there. You joined at a really key part of a stage of the business at Series B, and then you helped them go on to that huge explosion of growth in different capacities in terms of the role that you were playing. So it'd be good to talk about your time at Collibra.
yeah, absolutely. And it's very similar, Adam. Like, I think you're going to get this with me a lot. I had a incredible friend, colleague, gentleman that was the chief customer success officer at Collibra at the time, and he was looking to build out his global professional services organization. Called me up and basically started talking to me about what he was looking for, what he needed. And we fast forward, I ended up joining Collibra, working underneath him and the global director of the professional services organization. And so naturally, my charter was to grow that team, do the implementations of the Collibra technology, help our customers be successful. So funny story is my on day one, we all have different day ones, but uh, flew to New York at the time. We were a Belgian-based organization, but a lot of the leadership was in the process of moving the headquarters to New York. So I frequently traveled to New York at almost every other week, and then naturally having a global team, I jumped over to Europe a bunch. But first day one, New York, hanging out with my boss. He's giving me the rundown of the company, right? Not a lot of materials. It's a whiteboard where he's drawing pictures, and this is life, which is always kind of fun, right? Because it gives you opportunity. But later that afternoon, we had a meeting with a customer, and he's like, "Hey, you want to go to this thing?" And fast forward, we jump into this meeting. Customer wasn't completely happy with some of the services that were being developed or delivered. Naturally, we didn't have a lot of service to deliver, but he wasn't quite happy. Here I'm sitting there thinking my boss was going to handle it. And in the meeting, he turned and he looked at me and he goes, "This is your world now. How do you want to handle this thing?" And I'm like, I looked around at him. I'm thinking I'm being punked, like pranked. I'm like, is this really happening? But
a baptism of fire.
Yeah, baptism of fire. And there it was. I was off and running. And from there, made him very happy. They continued to purchase services from us and just built things, to your point, sort of from the ground up. There was a couple of things in place, but things needed to be evaluated, revamped, and so on and so forth. So early stages, working a lot with the sales team. At first, they weren't overly thrilled to have someone coming in trying to take some dollars from them to deliver some services. But in the long run, I taught them that, in order to be successful in a land and expand strategy, which a lot of SaaS companies are, you need to be able to successfully implement the technology. And just taught them that through a lot of painstaking meetings and darts being thrown at me and things like that. But naturally won them over, but it was tough. But grew the team, hired a lot of great people. And I think, to be successful, you have to have successful people around you. Sometimes, most of the times, even smarter folks around you. I was very fortunate to bring in some former colleagues, right? People actually want to work with me. So brought in some former colleagues and they helped me grow that team. So hired in Europe, grew that over there, hired here in the States, developed implementation methodologies, statement of work processes, a lot from the ground up. And I guess I was so successful doing that, my head of pre-sales at the time called me up and said, "Hey, would you consider maybe coming over to pre-sales or back to pre-sales and helping me build out my team over here? You've done such a great job." And so, Adam, I think one of the things as a good, strong leader, we kind of have to, I think, make ourselves, maybe controversial, maybe not. I think we have to make ourselves expendable by basically training, mentoring, hiring our replacements. And that's what I did. I had an incredible woman by the name of Michelle O'Connor that I'd worked with previously, brought her in. I knew one day she'd take over for me. And that's what we did. Once the head of pre-sales reached out to me, I knew PS was going to be in a great place with Michelle. So I called her up, talked to her, and I said, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And it was hard to leave because her and I had a great relationship. It was hard to leave to go over to that side. We had a great team. We built it. But she understood, took the reins, and went off running with that. And I, some may say I took a step back because I went from a global role to just a region. But, in the long run, Adam, I think you said it, right? Continued to advance the career. I think we only had 4 people in my region, and eventually grew that thing to, we grew pre-sales through both hiring and through promotions and taking on more and more responsibility. I ended up exiting out of Collibra, the VP of North America, with I think it was about 75 people underneath me. So during that time, groomed a lot of folks, promoted internally, my leadership team, as well as hired externally for managers. And, we were slowly building that thing and creating an empire, but a good empire, right? So it's always rewarding to, see individual contributors raise their hand for leadership, move them up the ladder, jump in, see your vision, work towards your vision, have the same philosophies and strategies. And it was awesome. It was fun. It was a lot of fun, Adam.
Yeah. Well, that in itself, to join an organization at Series B is, the first in professional services, build that function, hire and train and develop your replacement to then take the reins and then go and do the same within pre-sales and exit, at 75 people that you're ultimately accountable for in just under 7 years is such a huge achievement. I think one of the things that I'd be interested to learn, I imagine a lot of people listening that, may be faced with the same opportunity as yourself. I'm going to join a startup. They don't have anything in place. They've got a handful of customers, and I need to build this business unit from scratch. What advice would you be giving to them? Like, what were some of the first things that you did other than your baptism of fire, going to get the hairdryer treatment in New York from a customer? But like, what would you, what did you do in those first like 30, 60, 90 days? Like, what were some of the main initiatives that you were driving to, I suppose, to start, building these systems and processes and getting the business unit, humming nicely?
Yeah, great question. Here's the way that I see it, right? Everyone's got a different approach. I come from, my 30, 60, 90 oftentimes is when I first join an organization. I guess the first 30 days, if we're going to stick to it, 30, 60, 90, is I'm learning. I'm just sitting down, I'm evaluating, I'm learning, I'm watching. I'm seeing what works, what doesn't work, but not necessarily making suggestions or recommendations yet. Because what I have found throughout the course of my career, and this happened to me in the early stages, is sometimes when new leadership gets brought in, they come in and say, this is the way it's going to be. And that never really works well for sort of your ICs or the people that report to you. You don't
Yeah,
always necessarily adapt what you're selling if you just come in with your demands right away. So I spend a
yeah,
lot of time evaluating the processes. Whether it's how are we going about our implementations, what are our customers asking, so on and so forth, and kind of learning. The next around the 60 days, because I kind of go in with a vision, but you don't necessarily know if your vision's going to completely relate to your organization. Every organization is slightly different. There's a lot of
yeah,
similarities, but they're all slightly different. So the first 30 days is really kind of a learning, observing mode, kind of seeing if my vision aligns and do I have to change it in any sort of way or modify it, right? I guess it's 60 days. And well, it's also, sorry, Adam, lots of thoughts running up here. You're also getting to know your team, the people you're working with, and so on and so forth. I'm very much a relationship person. I wholeheartedly believe if you get to understand the people that work for you, both personally, professionally, more so personally, you're going to understand what motivates them, and you're going to be able to create a path for them professionally, and you're going to be able to basically build an environment that helps them succeed, right? A place that they want to be. So that's kind of like the first 30, even bleeding into 60. And then you start to kind of paint your vision, and I treat people like adults, man. That's just who it is. And I share information. And so, sharing information about what I envision or what I think needs to happen, and then getting, buy-in so that everyone uses a different analogy, in the boat and all rowing together.
and one of the things I just wrote down was, with regards to change, how do you get buy-in? So, it sounds like you're sharing a lot of information, you're being transparent about what you've observed and the things that you think, you could implement to improve things. But how do you get the buy-in? How would you go about,
Yeah,
you know,
you have to get them to buy into what you're selling, and it's based off of, a number of different things. One, it's painting a very clear picture. I
yeah,
think what I've found is the more open and transparent you are with people, the more they're willing to buy into that. It's also a trust factor. I've been very fortunate I mean, I've been an IC for a long time, and I know what good leaders and bad leaders are like. And my team needs to trust me. And in order to establish that trust, I think it goes into getting to know them. And then once they trust you, and once they see your vision, and then once they see you executing on that, I think it makes it easier for them to buy in and start marching. And then vulnerability. I'm not afraid to sit there and tell my team, listen, here's what I think we need to do. I need your help doing it, but I'm open to your suggestions as we go through this process, and I'm open to change based off of evaluating. And once they see that happening, and they see that your words really do you do execute on your words the right way, that's what's worked for me. That's just personally what's worked for me. And so that's kind of it. Just marching all in the right line or rowing the boat the right way, and that just helps to get everyone on board, and then sharing success. I can't. We mentioned it earlier. I can't do this alone. I need people. We all need people to make us successful, and I am more than happy to make my team successful. So as you get to know them personally, my opinion is that you understand what motivates them, because everyone's different. And once you understand what motivates them, you can sort of set that course, or provide those avenues for them to be successful within a business, right? Some people like the spotlight. So whether it's challenging them in the right way to deliver a publicly facing webinar, some people just like to be financially rewarding. So if we can put incentives in place and so on and so forth. So there's many different ways to kind of go about that.
Yeah, so you've described your leadership style there. Compassionate. You're transparent. You like to get to know your team really well. You like to share the success with the team and don't like necessarily take credit for everything. You've talked about like getting buy-in. Which gives us like quite a nice picture of you as a leader. You
Right.
built you built a really big team at Collibra. You had a huge amount of responsibility. How would you describe your overall your team DNA? Like, how would you describe how you built that team? You've described your leadership style and your approach to that, but how would you describe the team and the sort of DNA if you're part of a John Weisensee's team?
Yeah, good question. And let me make sure I completely understand what you're asking me, so I respond the right way. Like, overall, how do I go about um, identifying the individuals to be a part of the team? Something like that, Adam?
Well, we can talk about hiring in a minute, but one of the things that for you to have had the career trajectory that you have throughout your career, specifically at Collibra, with the constant progressions, the promotions, the being able to develop future leaders and build such a large organization under you, there has to be, something that you've done in terms of creating that DNA within the team. So if I'm a sales leader, listen to this, what's been your winning formula?
Listening, I think, listening and executing, partnering. We're all in this thing together. I don't check the ego at the door type stuff. Um, we're all in this thing together, and I think that I have a unique, or maybe it's not unique. I mean, I've worked throughout the course of my career with a number of incredible sales leaders, and it's important for me to partner with them. And if I can make them successful, then they're willing to partner with our side of the house, right? There's a lot of times I have seen and spoke to others in the field that unfortunately there's tension between the pre-sales engineer and the sellers, and there's no reason for that. But back to my world, I think it just goes back to team. It's a team. It's for me, it's like a family. We spend a lot of time together
Yeah.
throughout the course of a day, a week, a month, a year, right? And we spend probably more times with our coworkers than sometimes we do with our actual family members or extended family members. And so, just being a team, having their back, all working together, again, sharing the success, uh, positioning people for success, and then ultimately having their back if for whatever reason something doesn't go the way that it needs to go, right? So, you know, that's kind of what's worked for me, and I think that's what I guess has allowed me to be successful. One of the things I do in my interview process, I know you're going to ask me some interview questions, but a lot of my interviews, Adam, really don't necessarily get into their technical background. Really kind of, I spend a lot of time I try to get to know the individual, back to my earlier thing, and see
Yeah.
if they're going to basically have that ability to check the ego at the door. Because I believe very strongly that if if we can get along as people and individuals, I feel I can teach anybody that's willing to learn technology, whatever it be,
Yeah.
whether it's the software we're selling, whether it's, the databases that whatever it happens to be, whether it's, you know, the AWS platform. I believe everybody has the capacity to learn if they want to. And so that's what I do. I try to find people um, that are looking to learn and be successful, and then help them achieve that. So.
Okay. And so specifically during your time at Collibra, you progressed through the ranks quickly. You'll have gone from, hands-on, doing the job, to then managing people doing the job, to then managing managers, managing people doing the job. So one of the things I wanted to ask you was, if I'm an IC stepping up into my first line leadership role, or I'm a first line leader stepping up into a second line leadership role, what are the sort of main differences that you would describe in terms of the difference between managing an IC and managing a leader? Like, what advice would you give? What lessons have you learned? What mistakes have you made? What advice would you give in that domain?
Yeah, and I guess this really depends on where. I hate to do the it depends, but my experience has shown me it depends on where you're at in your organizational timeline, I guess. I think from an IC perspective, when you're just a manager of ICs, you're kind of looking at it more as a tactical perspective. You're sort of more in the day to day. You're still leading from the front potentially, so you're still doing your meetings with your prospects. You're still, you're helping your team grow. You're setting out their responsibilities, but you're still doing them yourself. So a lot of times in the early stages, my early managers were player coaches. I kind of hate that, but based off of where we were at the time, we needed them to be, because a lot of times people really enjoy being players more so than coaches. But as your team grows, you have to move over from player to coach.
On that point, John, what would you say is the optimum ratio between a pre-sales manager managing pre-sale ICs, consultants, whatever you want to call them? What would you say is the optimum ratio before that player coach has to go purely coach?
Yeah, good
in your
question.
experience?
My experience has been around 3 to 4 as a player coach, and once it grows above 4 directs, they can still do it, but my philosophy was never to have more than 6 direct
What are the
reports.
first things you notice that start giving when you start adding more heads to that player coach role before they come completely off the tools? What areas you start see the coaching?
Yeah, the coaching stops and the direct managerial stuff stops. And in some people, that's okay. Like, a lot of people don't want to be coached, but depending on how you're hiring, a lot of times you hire seniors, mid and juniors. The juniors really need coaching. So a lot of times it's definitely the coaching that hurts if you grow beyond that. But I think as you get to about 4-ish people, you can start doing a little bit more coaching. 5, definitely more coaching, and then by 6, you really shouldn't be playing all that much. Now, that doesn't mean, Adam, that they're not getting involved in meetings. They just don't have direct responsibility for basically, call it like a line item on a project plan or whatever, right? It's they can still get involved, definitely, but it's really more from a leader perspective versus a doer perspective, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And what about stepping up then? So we've talked about the managing of ICs, and then if I'm a frontline leader now, my team are performing well. I've just got the promotion I've been working towards, and now I'm stepping up into that second line leader where I'm going to be managing other leaders. How does your role change, and what advice would you give to people stepping up into that role?
Yeah, as you step up more and more, you start to. I mean, you're always thinking about things strategically, but I think it becomes more of a strategic focus. and you let your managers be more tactical, I guess, or perform those day in and day out things. However, you need to I've heard a lot of different things. You need to be there for them and paint your vision, and have them go out executing that, right? Buy-in, like we talked about. But two, I've heard it called, servant leadership, right? So you really do then become the individual that is trying to create that world for your team to be successful. So what I have personally seen, you still get out and do your prospect or your customer meetings, but they really dive off, and you become more of the person that is working internally to create that world for your organization where they can be successful, whether it's going out and looking for new tech that can make them successful, or knocking down or removing some obstacles or barriers that might have persisted. So it really becomes working with all the other departments to help your internal organization. That's what I've seen.
Yeah. Okay. And I think we can talk a little bit more about the hiring side now. When it comes to like hiring engineers, pre-sales engineers, solutions engineers, so many different organizations have coined different names for them. But what do you think makes a good IC within that pre-sales function?
The ability to wear so many different hats. I don't know. There's so many different things, right? I think one, it comes in with, you and I talked about it actually off camera in a separate conversation.
Yeah.
I enjoy, and maybe because it's my background, I enjoy working with and bringing in consultants into my organization, into the world of sales. One, I think they have the ability to communicate and relate to prospects, dig in, ask questions, understand those problems and challenges, and are able to talk to technologies at times maybe just an inch deep before they can take it further. So I like looking at consultative backgrounds for the world of pre-sales.
Yeah.
Those that are inquisitive, those that
And
want.
that was one of the other questions. So as a recruiter, there's so many times we get the spec, which is super technical, where they need a really technical pre-sales engineer, and then you get the more commercially focused ones.
Yeah.
Where do you lean towards? You said the more consultative side, but like if you were hiring like for Collibra, where did the pendulum swing? More commercial and consultative, more technical? What was your preference?
Depending on where, again, Adam, sorry that it depends. It seems like we lead with this a lot. It's based off of the stage and your needs.
Yeah.
There are times, one of the things that I have done throughout the course of my career is hire or build within my overall pre-sales org sort of there's no good way to put this, like more of your frontline business focused pre-sales partnered with your sellers SE, and then a deep, strong technical pre-sales team to help with things like proof of value, proof of concept, deep technical items. So depending on what you're looking for, so my deep technical teams, I've heard them called center of excellence, ninja teams, tiger teams. I've heard them called so many different things, but it was something I did at Collibra, was build this technical team to partner, like this, all under the pre-sales umbrella, to partner with like my more business focused SEs to go in and just knock out tough technical things. So depending on what position you're hiring for, depending on whether you need a more senior versus a more junior, I think it all depends on where you're at in your journey. Not only your team's journey, but the company's journey, right? So matching your team based off where you're at in your company. And so I hate to give you
So
that.
what I take from that, Don, is depending on where you're at in your journey, having a mixture of different, people within the team, so you can all lean on each other for different strengths and okay, fair enough. And obviously, the role of a pre-sales engineer is so varied. There's so many different elements. Within one organization, they're responsible for one thing, and within others, they're responsible for something completely different. How would you describe the role of the pre-sales engineer? Like, what's their priority initiative, their number one objective as the pre-sales engineer? Like, what's their purpose in the sales cycle?
Yeah, and you're right. I've seen so many different charters, quote unquote charters, for a pre-sales engineer. But ultimately, the way that I look at it is we're here to help solve problems. If we help solve
I've heard
the
it coined
problems,
as alleviate technical fear was the most succinct way someone's ever described it to me.
well,
What can you
ultimately,
say
we're
about that?
sellers. Yeah, we're selling. So
Yeah,
our role is to sell whatever our technology, but we do that through understanding our customer challenges and problems, and then mapping our strategic initiatives, our technical capabilities to those problems, and showing the prospect not only how we're going to make them successful now, but paint a picture to show them how successful they're going to be in the future, right? And so, yeah, I think that's it, right? Ultimately, and maybe this is what's helped me with my sellers. Our job is to sell. Like, most of our comp plans have a sales commission in it, and so we're responsible, and we're a key part of that sales team to help drive net new business as well as help expansion of our existing customers. And we do that ultimately through selling. But I think the thing that sets us apart is most of the time I've seen we have our prospect and or customer, if we're trying to upsell, best interest in mind, right? It's a small world, and if you make your customers successful, you might not necessarily always be at a Collibra. You might be at the next place, and people are going to remember who you are and say,
yeah.
"Hey, that guy helped me achieve success. I want to hear what he's got cooking now." So,
And at what point in the sales cycle do you think the pre-sales should get involved, and at what point do you think they should bow out? Because again, at different organizations, they do it in so many different ways. From your perspective, when does a pre-sales get looped in, and when do they bow out?
again, it's another, depending on where you're at in your life cycle and in your
Yeah,
journey. I think the key for me is a true partnership. One of the things that I had done when I took over pre-sales was, the previous team was more in a round robin, where it's like the next person up would go on this opportunity. And I think there is, I think there could be benefit to that, but what I prefer is to create partnerships of basically a sales team. And over time, what I've seen is if you partner an individual SE to an individual seller and create a relationship, and usually it's like a 2-to-1 or sometimes 3-to-1, and I've seen them go up to 4-to-1, which challenges. So for every, your pre-sales person might have
yeah,
4 sellers they're partnered with, for example.
yeah,
Usually you need them at 2. You become that primary resource, you become the selling team, and over time there's a beauty in those teams working together in a sales process where one's finishing the other sentences, or if there's a pivot by the salesperson, the SE knows where they're going, or if there's something happening on the SE side, the seller knows where they're going. And the most successful teams I saw were the strong partnerships between AE and SE. So,
yeah. I can agree with
establishing,
that. Often, like when I speak to top performing AEs, that have really done well, and you ask them what's been a big driver behind the success, when you go outside of attitude, mentality, work ethic, when it comes to like actually what made you successful and why did you
right.
win these deals, a lot of the time, they had a really good pre-sales engineer that they partnered with. They had the good chemistry. They knew how to work together, and that partnership can be a real like recipe for success.
Yeah. So a lot of times when that strong partnership is formed, listen, I like the SE involved in the deal as early as possible. Now, there are times when this is possible, and there are naturally times when it's not possible. I think that I've always been okay having a SE on a discovery call. I think they can ask certain questions that paint a picture. They can position um, strategies, or not strategies, but they can position like corporate values or corporate direction in a, not saying sellers can't do this, but from a
Yeah.
technical perspective, Adam, right? Through the questions they ask, not necessarily, it's just through the questions they ask. They get their prospects thinking a certain way. It's almost like leading them to a path that will ultimately land in your favor. And so if you're in a position in an organization where you can have your SE early on, um, I'm all for it because I've seen success out of that. And then the flip side is, how long should they be? And again, this varies throughout the course of your journey. I've seen teams, and in full disclosure, Adam, in the early stages, we were a land engine. We had to be, right? We didn't have the customer base, so it's like land, 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 land. Land, move on, get the next one. Land, move on, get the next one. Right now, over time, I think this is problematic in the sense that there's a relationship and a trust. We talked about it amongst the team, but at the prospect level, there's a relationship and trust that happens between the SE and the people we're selling to, right? And to take that individual away from them all of a sudden and say, hey, here's your post-sales team, we're out of here. Nice working with you. Sometimes leaves a sour taste in people's mouths. It really does. And so over time, as we grew the team and we can afford to do this, I liked to see that sales engineer stay with an organization, maybe check in every now and then throughout the course of the implementation and continue that relationship, because what I've seen is that helps expansion, right?
It does. And the other thing is, so I read recently there was a survey, and this sort of feeds back into the point you make about, I suppose, the value that the pre-sales consultant brings, and how much of an impact they have on the customer and driving value. So I read, in a survey of over 8,000 people that all work for companies ranging between like mid-market organizations right the way up to Fortune 100 size companies, over 40% of the value brought and driven during the sales cycle was basically, it all came from the SE.
Mm-hmm.
So when you speak to execs, operational level people within the organization that are buying from the vendor, 40% of the value driven during that sales process all came from the sales engineer, which is a huge amount, and a huge amount of success that needs to be attributed to that individual. And obviously, I know there's a lot of other people. You got your AEs, you got your SDRs, you got your first line managers, but 40% of that deal closing was down to the sales engineer. And you mentioned about recognition before and sharing success. How is it that you gave recognition then? How did you give recognition to your team?
Yeah, great question. I mean, there's so many different ways to do it, but one of the first things we did was just start getting the SE listed on the win cycle or on the win announcement, right?
Yeah.
Oftentimes the recognition goes to the AE, and it's well deserved. To your point, there's
the
so
AE
many.
gets to ring the bell, don't they? It's the SE doesn't get to ring the bell.
They're. Hey, I get why, right? Their job's on the line if the deal doesn't come through, or if their quarters are bad, or so on and so forth, right? But the first thing is, if you're going to be a team, if you're going to be a selling team, get that SE listed, right? And that goes a long way, because people want to know. I can't tell you how many times there were so many accolades given out to the team. I was never once messaged. And then every organization's different. It could just be, hey, who was the primary SE on this opportunity, and their names listed. But then a lot of times over time, working with my sales leadership to say, hey, can you like write a little blurb in the win announcement that mentions what the SE did, right? And we started to see that grow. So that's one side of the house. That's that overarching get the word out, right? Which is great, public exposure within the organization or internal exposure globally. Internally amongst the team, we create little competitions and things like that. And, I would recognize individuals first, second, and third. I hate to put places to it, but, top SEs before there's things like club or anything like that. Um, Listen, man, I'm not opposed to putting in a couple of bucks of my own to buy them something nice as
Yeah.
a win, right? So when you're doing a QBR, usually like maybe, you do your quarterly business review or kickoff. I like my team very much involved in those. We do award recognition. Maybe it's small. Maybe it's just something like a Starbucks or an Amazon gift card or something like that, and eventually growing to something larger, like when you get to know your team, what they're working on and what's important to them, whether it be maybe a nice bottle of whiskey or a gift card to Home Depot because they're doing a renovation. So really celebrating um, their hard work internally, and that just drives competition. Because I had a number of individuals that were very much going, I want to be number one, I want to get that award, I want to get whatever you're selling at that stage, all the way up to eventually Collibra implemented and instituted club recognition, right? And so then everyone's working to get on their club trips. But that's kind of it. Could be small at
Yeah.
first and growing, but people just want to be recognized. So, sorry.
Yeah. And you mentioned before about, the A's jobs on the line and that stuff, and why a lot of the time they get the recognition. So I want to talk to you about like performance. Again, as a recruiter, we speak to so many different companies that do it in so many different ways. I wanted to talk to you about target setting, particularly with your teams. How is it that you would set targets when it comes to pre-sales? Because often they have a shared revenue target with the AEs, or it's a team target. They get targeted on the number of POVs that they do. There's so many different ways that you can target and measure performance within an SE function. But from your perspective now, for any other leaders out there listening that are thinking about how they run their business unit, what advice would you give to them when it comes to like best practice for target setting?
Yeah, I mean, again, here we go again, Adam, depending on where you're at in your journey. But, there's leading and trailing indicators of an SE's team's performance. Naturally, most organizations look at ARR, right? Most SaaS organizations are driving towards an ARR target, and you're completely accurate, right? Most SEs have, there's many different ways to do it, but they have an ARR deliverable as well. And that's usually what they're driving towards. We've done a number of different things throughout the course of our journey, whether it be things like, proof of value. I like proof of value over proof of concept as a terminology. Concept sounds usually in our world where we're painting a picture, and in my experience, I'm selling an enterprise solution. So I'm trying to sell the value of that solution, not just what it can do today, but what it can do tomorrow. So I like the term proof of value anyway. So, how many proof of value workshops, for example, have you done? Tracking, like you can get crazy with those, tracking their success rate, right? So that you can determine how you're going to behave as a team. Is the execution of a successful proof of value or proof of concept leading to signature? You can do meetings. You can track where SEs are getting involved in a deal. We were doing that for a little bit, right? Naturally, throughout the course of your deal cycle, every organization has different cycles, but we were tracking like if an SE got involved earlier, back to our earlier conversation, did that lead to a more successful close?
Yeah.
You can set things like, I don't always like to do this because it starts to do that post-sale side of the house, but you can track things like, customer hours or prospect hours, like how much time is an SE spending with their actual customer or prospect. Naturally, the more time they spend, actually with their prospects and our customers, we see sales go up. There's a number of different targets that you can set throughout the course of your journey to track your team's progress, and that allows you to reshape things, right, from a strategic perspective, as we were talking. It gives you hard data and reports to say, okay, if the SE gets involved at 50%, 7 times out of 10, we're not closing those deals. It gives you data to say, hey, silly me, we should be tracking earlier, right? So we leverage Salesforce throughout the course of my career. There's many tools out there, but you can create reports, dashboards, and exposure, again, of what your team is doing to upper leadership, as well as your team. You see competition, right? You can set ARR deliverables or targets and things like that. So there's so many different things out there. I think we could take the rest of the podcast talking about them, but there's a lot of great books out there for anyone looking to learn, both leading and trailing indicators for SE teams, and when not to set those things up.
And I suppose in terms of some of those indicators, or like activity, KPIs, whatever it is that you're measuring as part of the performance of the individual, one of the things that we see as recruiters dealing with different organizations and the way that they set their teams up is also the way that they incentivize them and compensate. There's often, when you look at an AE, which is quite often, pretty black and white, 50-50 split, really straight down the line. Whereas with the SEs, it can sometimes, it could be anything from 60-40 up to 80-20. Again, really, a question where someone could, take from this and implement into their business right away. Where have you found the sweet spot, and what do you think is the best combination for compensating SEs in terms of their base and OTA? What do you think drives the right behavior?
Yeah, personally, it's somewhere between 70-30, 75-25 is what I've seen. So that gives them a good mix of naturally performing the role at a high level, but also gives them that competitive and or inspiration, drive, and desire to want to get to that 100%, if not 110, 120, 130%, to get into acceleration, right? That's been my experience. Most of the time, we've been right around 75-25, but I've also seen like a 70-30 mix work real well. Leadership, your upper leadership, I've seen at that 60-40 rate, because usually they're at a comp band that drives that. And then you're right, Adam, I've seen 80-20. A lot of times, I don't think that necessarily inspires completely that drive and desire to go above and beyond. So like that,
you want people to have a bit more skin in the game. Yeah,
exactly. It gives them the skin in the game. It gives them the ability to partner. And frankly, it's made those targets, that 70-30 or the 75-25, splitting hairs there. It's made the sales team happy, right? Because then to your point, they see their skin in the game and that the team's really working to help them be successful, because that AE success is ultimately going to lead to our team's success.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for that, John. I suppose one of the last topics I wanted to talk to you about was about hiring. I'd say most companies that we work with, the pain points that they have when it comes to hiring AEs is typically when they're either hiring the first, the strategic, the key first on the ground. They're the ones that they struggle with the most, or when they're really looking to start ramping up and they need them in volume. But the role that I find, no matter what stage of growth the business is at, that they struggle to hire is good SEs. Attracting them, hiring them, and also retaining them is like some of the biggest challenges companies face when they're looking to grow and they want to get good people. From your experience, you grew the organization to 75 people, within your business unit. Hiring was a big part of it. developing and promoting. But from a hiring perspective, what have been some of your key learns in terms of like what key traits do you look for, what behaviors, any like common denominators in terms of backgrounds, academics, hiring from big companies, small companies, whatever it might be? What patterns have you seen over the last 20 years when it comes to hiring these kind of individuals?
Yeah, good question. And this is another one that I think could take up like hours of discussion. And in full
Yeah.
fairness, Adam, I inherited some folks throughout the course of that journey, but I was responsible for a lot of additions to the team. So you're accurate there. I Man, I think it talks to some of the things we discussed earlier. I look for people that are, they have an engaging personality, a friendly personality. I look for individuals with that consultative background. Doesn't always have to be a consultative background. I do look at past work experience. I know things are changing a little bit, and this would be an interesting discussion for you. I like a little bit of tenure in my hires, only
Is that because
because
of your background? Because, 12 years at IBM, 7 years, like the average tenure at the minute for sales reps across all go to market is like less than 2 years.
our role is hard.
Yeah.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And we're going to invest time and effort into enabling and training and mentoring and all that stuff in a good SE. And maybe this is one of the reasons why you might struggle a little bit. I don't know. But oftentimes, what I have found, Adam, is it's going to be a big gap, but there's a 6 month to a year learning curve before. Uh, Listen, there's always exceptions. I had incredible people come in, after a month or after like 2 weeks, they're like, put me in front of the prospect. I'm ready to go. This is boring. I can't shadow anyone anymore. Right. So there's always an exception to the rule. But a lot of times what I've seen is it takes a while for your SEs to stand in front with full confidence in a pressure situation, in a sales situation, in front of that prospect, and be completely confident. And so because we're investing
That's
a lot
rich
of
coming from you with your day one experience in New
time,
York.
I know. Well, not everyone can handle that, man. Not everyone can handle that. I can't say I handled it well, but I did it. So,
Sorry, I
but
cut you off then, but
yeah, no, it's all good because it's true. Like there's different people throughout the world, and I think it's what makes teams great, right? When you hire that diversity. But
Yeah.
I'm investing in them, and I'd like them to invest some time in us. And it's hard. You admitted it, right? You didn't admit, you said you struggle. And so like if I see someone that's been, a year here, a year there, I mean, I'll point blank ask them throughout the course of the interview, talk to me about why you're jumping. And, if they're jumping because they're looking to get ahead, I hate to say this, man. They might not necessarily be the best fit at times, depending on where you're at. Because if you're small, you definitely need folks there that are going to probably be with you for the long haul, because that's kind of like your base. That's your core. That's basically what you're laying the foundation for where you're going to go with your organization. If you're larger, you might be able to get away with some turnover and people, coming and going a little bit. But at the same time, it's just we're investing, we're training, we're enabling, and the best SEs usually have some time under their belt, meaning, they've seen some deal cycles. They get used to the questions. They know how to stand up with confidence and say, previous XYZ, without naming names, has, we did it this way. I think it's going to work for you this way. And then they hear about the success stories and prospects are willing to hire. And that's why I think I like consultants or even folks that have inspiration coming out of the professional services world, because they spend a lot of time implementing the tech, and they've seen a lot of different things, and they see what people struggle with, and they help them solve those problems. So if they are the right people, right individual to move them to the pre-sale side, that's a magical, in my opinion, that's been pretty magical, and it has worked well. So that's why that's some of the things I look for. Common, again, I want to get in the boat. I want to learn. I want to make this team successful. I don't want to be the toxic person that comes in and it's me, me, me. I'm the hero. There's a time and place for that for some organizations. That hasn't worked well in the type of teams I've built. Hope that makes sense.
Cool. Yeah, no, definitely. And I think in terms of, starting to bring things to a close, I think it'd be good to understand, throughout your career, all the different roles that you've been involved in, all the progression that you've had, future leaders that you've developed, consultants that you've developed, people you've hired, and deals you've closed, the revenue you've been involved in growing within companies like IBM and Collibra. What's been like your biggest success story so far? Like, what have you been most proud of?
Yeah, good question. That's a tough one. There's a lot of things I've been proud of. Right or wrong, here's the first thing that pops into my head. I'm going to leave names out, obviously, naturally. I'll just say when I moved to like a leadership role in one of my organizations, I inherited some folks. Naturally, you inherit people. One of the people I inherited was on a performance improvement plan. And I was being pushed by folks within my organization to execute on the plan. And I just took a little time to get back to my earlier story. I took some time to get to know the person, understand again what motivated them, and understand what the challenges were, and just kind of understood what they needed to be successful, and started to help that person be successful through mentorship, guidance, a little bit of a hands-on, very much involved, and just mentored. And over the course of time, that person went on to not only be very successful, became my number one SE, became one of the most requested SEs, went on to flourish in the organization, to other roles within the organization, and has launched a pretty successful career. So that's more at an individual level, but that was one of the first things that popped into my head. I think it was a great success story and just something I was proud of. Just didn't listen to what everyone was telling me and gave the person a chance, and they went on to be extremely successful. So as a leader,
you see stuff like that happening a lot in sports, don't you? New managers come in, players get another shot at the team, and then next thing they're rising through the ranks, and it's it's not just sport where things like that happen. It happens in the business world. So it's nice, and it's also nice to hear that a big part of something that you're proud of involved the success of someone else, not just your own success.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, their success is ultimately our success, right? And we all have backstories, we all have lives, and I think that getting to understand them in times, and if they were willing to they wanted the help, they were willing to learn. And that's part of it. They didn't shut down and say, "The heck with this, I'm out of here." They really wanted to learn, and it wasn't me per se. It was really that individual really rolling up their sleeves and working hard to better themselves at their craft. And so, yeah.
And I think
that's the one that's
when it's when it comes to like performance management, if someone's underperforming, normally it's like one of two things. It's either skill or will. And in that instance, it sounds like the will was there, but maybe the skill wasn't, and someone hadn't quite figured out how to help them develop those skills. So yeah, fair play to you. And I suppose, in terms of like, final question, then, it'd be good just to understand a little bit about, when you're not working at the likes of Collibra, building pre-sales and post-sales teams and building tech companies, what does John do in his spare time there? Where would we find you at the weekends? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I live in Phoenix, Arizona, here in the United States, and so right now I spend a lot of time with my family in the pool, but because it's so hot. But no, I'm married. I have my wife and I have a daughter. She'll be 17. So going through the trials and tribulations of raising a teen, maybe some of the reasons why I have that gray. I do like to get outside when the weather is nice. I enjoy golfing. I enjoy mountain biking and hiking much when the weather's nice. And I'll golf here in the summer. I'm crazy. My wife says, what are you doing out there? I'm like, I don't know. I got that big old man golfer hat and things like that. We like cooking. I married, my wife comes from an Italian background. So food, family, and I guess adult beverages are always on the mix for the weekend. So anyway, that's a little about me. It's the work hard, play hard type mentality. So, we do have to have our downtime. Usually you'll find me on the golf course, struggling with my golf game, but takes my mind out of it, gets me breathing some fresh air. And funny how it gives you time to reflect and think about work while you're out there. I hate to do it because we have to take a break, but sometimes good ideas come out on the golf course, Adam.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, listen, John, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing all of your experience and such insight, particularly within this particular business unit within the go-to-market function. Your experience of building, technical sales teams. It's been an absolute pleasure. So yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, no, back at you. I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity. Thanks everyone out there for watching, and hopefully, I hope I help someone along the way. If not, there's a lot of smart people out there, but it's been fun. It's been a great hour and a half, 2 hours. So I appreciate you. Thank you, Adam.
Good stuff. Thank you. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you want more information about the podcast, head over to our website, Scale with Strive.